Welcome to First Contact Stories of the Call Center. I'm your host, Christian Montez, where we dive into the lives that connect us all, one call at a time, revealing the stories behind the leaders' transformative journeys in the contact center world. Hey everyone, welcome back to First Contact Stories of the Call Center, the podcast where we're going to dive deep into the unexpected journeys of the call center leaders and obviously look at the future of the industry. I'm your host, Christian Montez. I'm super excited for today's guest. We got Phillp Bennett, the Customer Service Operations Manager at Empire today, and has a long history of really diving behind the scenes of how do you modernize the contact center, how do you optimize customer experience. And in this episode, we're also going to be unpacking how businesses are innovating from SMS to chat or real live AI tools and what it takes to tackle those evolving needs within the customer experience. So with that said, Phil, love to have you here. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Christian. I really am honored to be here.
Look, I love this part of the story because we always find ourselves talking to our peers and networking, and we're just like in the space, but we all have a story of how did we get here? Because I know everyone doesn't wake up and go, when I grow up, I'm going to work in the contact center space. So you got a story. Love to hear it. I know our audience wants to as well.
Okay, well, I'm kind of that way. I mean, my very first contact with a contact center or call center was in 1984, and I was working as a road salesman. And if you didn't bring enough leads back for them to call on, they would punish the sales reps by making you do 2 hours of cold calling. Okay. Last thing in the world I ever wanted to do was work in a call center doing cold calling because it sucks. And I mean, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know because nobody likes that. But, you know, the funny thing was, even though I never wanted to work in a call center, fast forward, I went to work for a startup firm, a brokerage firm, and I was going to be head of their customer service department. And the call center answered to customer service. And that was kind of neat because that was right around 2002. And the company's no longer around anymore, but it was called Options Express. We were a very, cutting edge type, edgy startup. We weren't even going to actually have a call center. We were just going to build a chat center. Of course, customers don't care what you want. They do what they want and they will call us. And so as the phones kept ringing, they kept sending calls our way. And all of a sudden we had this multi-channel call center before anybody was even talking about any of that stuff. And the funny thing was, because I started in chat, I've always been a fan of the digital side, the modernization, where we're going, not just because to be real honest with you, I'm not a great person on a phone call. I mean, I'm one of those people that really would not fit well in a call center because I didn't enjoy being on the phones all the time. What I did enjoy was doing chat, however, because that's a whole different level. And for me, there was something very fascinating about it. And the neat thing about that whole experience was we learned a lot because nobody had any best practices for chat in those days. You're talking 2002. I mean, when I went and I talked to a live person, they were like, we just sort of do it this way. I mean, nobody had figured it out yet. And as part of that, and as part of the fact that we weren't going to have phones, we started everybody in chat. And it was a great tool because you could train the agent without the agent having to put the customer on hold because you're slower typing coming back to them. And what we found was that there are certain agents that do much better on a one-to-one basis. They don't multitask well, and they just didn't adapt to chat. And then there were other agents that did. And if you let them go, I mean, really the sky was the limit. A lot of chat platforms limit the number of agents you can have. But the fact of the matter is we had one agent that just because we let her go and do whatever she wanted, she was able to do 15 chats at a time, and you wouldn't know if you were on the other end. Okay. And the funny thing was I was talking to somebody once about, the benefits of chat and how you could repurpose agents if you needed to when chat was slow, put them on the phones if you were busy. And she turned and she looked at me and she said, if you ever put me on the phones, I'll quit. And I said to her, I said, Melissa, if I ever put you on the phones, they should fire me, because that would be the most massive waste of resources I could possibly imagine for the company. But what you really found was that digital agents don't really make good phone agents. Phone agents don't really make good digital agents. And so I believe that has caused what I think has been a problem in the call center industry. They don't do chat well. And the problem is, if you don't do chat well, a lot of these other digital things that are coming down the pike, you're not going to do those well. And okay, we got chatbots, so that's good. And we're going to have bots for the social stuff, but there's still stuff that, there's a difference between phone and chat. And part of the problem is, and I know this from working in call centers, if you bring in a chat program, you are going to put your best phone agents on there because you want it to succeed, and you're going to put your best people on it. Chances are that's going to make it fail. And that's one of the most interesting things. But just try to tell a call center director that we need to take the people who are like on finals because they don't want to be on the phones, they're doing all this call avoidance, and put them into that chat program. They're going to say, you're crazy, we're never going to do that. So it's kind of interesting, some of the things that you pick up along the way, and yet still are very, very hard to bring in as best practices. So anyway, I think I've gotten off topic. I apologize for that.
No. It's a great segue into kind of thinking about when you were at that business and it was a chat first, and then learning these lessons between the right seat on the bus, and then also figuring out that you have the right overall mix of addressing what you really are there for, which is your customer. Right. You can do all the things you want, but in the end, if your customer doesn't want it, they'll either find another way that you didn't think of or don't want to do, or they stop reaching out to you because they're not a customer anymore. Right.
Exactly.
And then that pivots, right, to that part of your career. How did that get to where you are today? And how has the role of what you're looking and doing now, like, what does that look like today?
Well, so it's interesting because we were a financial services company that was doing options trading, which may be one of the coolest things in the world, especially back at the turn of the century. I mean, options were the things that the big guys use to keep the little guy down, that sort of thing. There's some great stories from that industry, but the thing is, I thought I wanted to stay in financial, in the financial world. No, that wasn't it at all. And I got a chance about a year later, after we were bought out, to go to work for another startup. And I really couldn't drop everything fast enough to get back to the call center. It turned out that the puzzle of facilitating communications really is the thing that became my passion. I love, if somebody wants to talk to you, and I don't care how they want to talk to you, I want to make sure that they can talk to you that way. And it's really interesting what you just said about people will not do the things you want them to do. I mean, the real reason you have all the channels is because everybody picks their own channels. And that's the way they want to communicate with you. And if they choose that method to communicate with you, I believe it's my goal is to make sure that I facilitate that and make sure that it can happen. One of the interesting things is when, especially this started around chat, but we used to sell chat to our superiors with the ROI that this was going to deflect calls away from the IVR. Nothing could be further from the truth. It probably has never deflected a single call from your IVR. What it does do is it brings in new customers that wouldn't have called you because they didn't want to call you. And if you didn't have chat, they would have done business elsewhere. And so generally that's where your real ROI comes from. You create a new channel and a new flow of people. And then the other thing is you have to pay attention to not forcing customers to change channels. So if you build chat out, you should be able to do, if not everything you can do on the phones, almost everything you can do on the phones. Otherwise, it's not really a valid channel to run. I'll never forget, I had a situation where I bought a product, and right after I pressed buy, I was talking to my wife, telling her I'd gotten this product, and she said, "Oh, you got the wrong product." And I won't get into specifics because I don't want to call out, it's a very well-known brand. But I went back to them and I went to their FAQs, and it said, well, the best way to do an exchange is to chat with us. Ah, great. This is perfect. So I get on chat and I'm doing it because I'm at work and doing all the other things. And I get to the end of the chat and the guy says, "I can't do that for you." I said, "What?" He said, "No, you have to call us." And I said, "But your FAQs told me to chat." He said, "I'm sorry." He said, "It's just not set up that way." That's a very frustrating experience for a customer. And you really, really, really don't want to put them through that if you possibly can. So, I mean, I get it. There are some people who believe that chat was less secure than phones. I would argue it probably is just as secure as any other method of communication. But there's people that worry about those things.
Well, it's funny about that story, how the ROI concept of deflecting from the IVR and you realizing that it's not the example you just gave. If anything, not only did it generate an inbound call to the IVR, but now it generated a customer that already had a friction oriented negative experience. And so
yes.
Now when you poorly implement other channels for the sake of having other channels, and not knowing how to engage your customer, you're probably just going to make your phone part of your business, if you still have it as a channel,
Yep.
required to have a lot of more difficult conversations with people that are probably going to end up needing people with some empathy and some other skill sets to know that they're coming in hot.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. And that's, I'll tell you what, and that makes the agent's life worse. And, a lot of people don't take that into account. I will say something here that I've said very publicly. I watch TED Talks now and then. They always ask the CEO, "What is the thing that keeps you awake at night?" And they'll say supply chain or cost, whatever. The thing that should keep them awake at night is the fact that the person that they have hired to speak in their voice, representing their company, and basically being a de facto CEO on the phone with the customer is the very person that they're trying to outsource, downsize, or automate. And I think that should keep people awake at night, because to me, the best way to predict future business is how we treat the customer in our current business.
Absolutely. I couldn't say it better myself. And what's interesting about your career path, right? You have these moments where you're at startups, you're at businesses where maybe people wear a lot of different hats, things move fast, growth can be painful, at the same time can be potentially very lucrative for people or fulfilling. But then now you're with a brand that's been around has a history. And so now when you think about those that work at startups versus established brands, there's always a difference on how companies' cultures and how businesses change and evolve and adopt. And so when you're thinking about the modernization of businesses to meet their customer the way they need and want to be met, when you talk about from when you were working in the startup phase, bootstrapping, kind of early stage, all the way through like today, legacy brands that have a culture and a history, how do you balance pushing and driving innovation, but also respecting and balancing that brand legacy?
That's a great question. And it's an interesting question, because this has been one of the things that was probably the most interesting part of my early career at Empire, because what a lot of people, and this is going to be important for the discussion of where we go in the future. What a lot of people don't know is that the call center is probably the last place money really gets spent in most companies. We bring in technology that works, we ride it until it's dead. Okay. And, Empire was no different. But here's the thing, it's not Empire or anything else. That's just the way companies approach these things, and that's normal. The problem will be with the adoption of new technologies because of that, because, when I got to Empire, one of the real reasons that Tracy brought me in was to put a chat team together and to build a chat program for Empire. That sort of morphed into, what can we do in the call center to improve our operations? At the time, we were using a Cisco platform that was approaching end of life. Ironically enough, it was the platform that we had just migrated to in 2008 at my first call center. So I was familiar with it. But it didn't have, things that we consider to be common. It didn't have skills-based routing. It didn't have the ability to do callbacks or anything else. And as a result of what we did bringing in chat, they asked me to oversee that project to bring in the CCAS platform. And luckily I had just done it at the previous company that I'd worked for. So I knew how to do it. And the good news is I knew some of the pitfalls that we were going to face. You'll never know all the pitfalls that you're going to face, but you have to respect the fact that, and especially Empire is a very interesting case because 800-588-2300, and I won't sing the jingle because I don't have my son's gift of voice, but this is a number that resonates with people. I'll talk to people at a conference and they'll say, where do you work? And I'll tell them, and it'll take them a second. They'll say, well, what do you do? And I'll say, carpets and flooring. They go, oh, and you can see the jingle running, and yeah, absolutely. It goes off. And so, I mean, when you come into a situation like that, this was a culture around the phone number. And so anything that wasn't around that phone number was considered off-brand, not respecting the brand. And I did have people who aren't here anymore say, you're not respecting the brand. And the truth of the matter is I'm absolutely respecting the brand because here's the thing, we talk about channels going away. Channels never go away. Okay. Now you that may sound crazy, but here's the deal. If you wrote me a letter, we would read it. And then we would respond to you. We probably wouldn't write you a letter back, but we would respond to you. So even the letter writing channel still exists. I'll still take a fax from you if you want to send me a fax. Nobody does business with faxes, but I have a dedicated fax line in case you want to send me a fax. And the same thing's happening. We're seeing this transition with voice, but it's very, very subtle. And so there are people who say the 800 number is going to go away. That's not going to happen. There will always be a use case for voice. And there will always be people that will choose the voice channel over future channels. Now, as we evolve, there will be fewer and fewer of them. Someday, voice communication may go the way of a letter. We'll still answer the phone if you call us, but that's not the way we normally do business. But the problem that you get is at the time we were receiving, thousands of calls a day. And the problem with that is some of those were customer service calls. Some of those were calls to set up an appointment. If you're not watching this very, very closely, the customer service calls can take over your appointment setting calls and the business starts to go down, and we don't want that. One of the things that we did to protect the brand is we turned SMS on for that 800 number. Now we don't advertise it yet, but that's okay. You can SMS us there, but that'll protect the brand probably better over the next 20 years than maybe anything else. Now, the rest of that's up to our marketing team who are fabulous. And I got to tell you, I love some of our new commercials. You should see them. We actually have commercials where they don't sing the jingle anymore. They just play it in the background. They play the song in the background. Well, the words. You're doing the words when you hear the song. But we are changing our focus in a lot of ways. But you have to navigate it cautiously. And so I would bring up a suggestion. It would get shot down. It's okay. 3 months later, bring up the same sort of suggestion, maybe a little different. And it was through incrementalism and constantly keeping sort of a low grade pressure on moving us forward that we did. And it allowed us to do things that we might not have been able to do. we got our first chatbot because we had to replace the platform. Or the platform that we were on was going away. We brought in a new platform. Okay, now that was 2020, just before the pandemic. And this platform had a bot built into it. So I'm like, cool, we can start doing stuff with a bot, see if that works. Well, the powers that be really didn't want an appointment setting bot because they were afraid that that would take away from the appointment flow. And I mean, the neat thing about replacing the platform, we're paying basically the same money. So, you have the same ability for your agents to take chats. Your agents are still taking chats. We built the front end out beforehand so that, customers would get used to it, but they all went to live people as we were building out automation. We stopped work on the appointment setting bot, and we did some other bots that proved that it worked, but didn't produce any real ROI for us. Well, because of the pandemic and because of the great resignation that came after it, we were so shorthanded. We had 3-hour wait times on our phones coming out of that. That was an insane time. Okay. But I was able to go back and say, hey, we could turn this on and redeploy some of those agents into our phone channels. And we did. What we didn't expect was that it was more effective and more efficient than our live agents were, almost 2-to-1. So our live agents were converting appointments in the chat. And remember, if you call us to set an appointment, you're calling us to set an appointment. Those are fairly high conversion. But if you're chatting with us, that may not be why you're chatting with us. And so we always expected a lower conversion rate on chat. Live agents would convert 13 to 15% of the time. We turned the chatbot on and it was converting somewhere between 24 and 28% of the time. I've seen it as high as 35%. And and here's the thing, if you go on my website today and you look at my chatbot, it is super primitive. It is very RPA. And remember, we found it in 2018. We launched it in 2020. 5 years is an eternity in bot world. Okay. But it works better than a live agent. The ROI of those additional appointments being set, because we're not spending any more for marketing. We're not increasing the funnel at the top. We're not, spending lots of money training agents and working to get them to close. It's just doing it. That is a huge ROI because that's literally found business that we weren't capturing before. Hopefully we were, hopefully they were calling us or whatever. But and here's the thing, if the bot fails, then it goes to a live agent to try again. So, I mean, you've even got that going for you with the bot. And so, those are the things that it's kind of hard to really put out in a strategy because you've got to be ready to move when the time is right. And that's kind of hard to predict. But to me, that's how you protect the brand, because the ultimate protection of the brand is ensuring that we're going to be here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, and making sure that we're meeting the customer where they are is going to be the way that we're going to have to do that in the future. I think that's going to be a major change.
It's interesting. There's so much to unpack there because you have to have done a little research or at least try to figure out why was the bot so much more effective than an agent.
Oh, yes.
Situation. So what's the outcome? Like, what did you find that made you go, oh, wow, there's a big difference here?
So I don't have anything concrete. And to this day, that's probably the thing that concerns me the most is I really don't know. I can tell you that there are some behaviors that I think are different. I think the fact is that, when it connects to a live agent, there can be a bit of a gap before the live agent is kicked in and talking. But that doesn't really track because presumably they were already talking to a live agent. So that's not it. The only thing I can point to is that there was a study that was done that I read about 2 years ago, where they said that they believed that or that they found through studies that people are more willing to book an appointment with a bot than they are with a live person. I don't understand why, but you know what? If that's the case, I'm fine with it. And if that's the case, then the real question comes: should we explore using this in other places? And I think that there is definitely an argument for A/B testing, and certainly the fact of the matter is we're going to have to explore that, because here's the thing: AI automation is coming, whether we want it or not. I don't know exactly when we're going to see widespread adoption, but it's coming. And so it behooves us to start seeing how our customers, whether they want it or not. I mean, one of the questions we had when we put it in, Empire today probably, our demographic is a little older than some companies. Would our customers be willing to talk to a bot or chat with a bot? We didn't know that. And so all of this was in question when we turned it on. And, the answers are yes, they're willing to chat with a bot. They're so willing to chat with a bot that they'll book more appointments with the bot. And in some ways, I'm one of those people that, hey, if it works, don't break it, let it go. And there's a little of that's involved with it. Do I know that we need a better bot? Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. I always love when a bot salesman talks to me, because he's like, oh yeah, I played with your bot. It was really quaint. Yeah, I know. But here's the deal. Here's what you've got to overcome if you want to bring your bot in.
Running a contact center these days takes a great deal of courage and fortitude. Nobel Biz would like to salute the contact center community for not giving up and working hard to drive their businesses down the road to success. As the promise keepers of the industry, our goal was to provide one of the most versatile and cost-efficient omnichannel solutions on the market. Nobel Biz Omni Plus is a cloud contact center software that gives instant access to a full range selection of channels, from voice calls, two-way SMS, email, WhatsApp, Twitter, Telegram, among others. Our solution offers complete control over the externalities by switching from an on-premise technology to a cloud-based solution in just a matter of hours. Get integrated compliance support, advanced reporting, seamless agent and supervisor dashboards, and many more performance-enhancing capabilities, all in just one product. Nobel Biz Omni Plus, the future-proof solution for scaling contact center operations. Learn more about Nobel Biz Omni Plus at www.nobelbiz.com.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in my brain, I sit there and I think of, okay, why did people use the bot? And it's like, did they talk to a person at some point? They weren't ready to buy, and now it's convenient because they're multitasking and talking with a bot just works. Mm-hmm. Is it the first time they've engaged your brand and it was convenient just because they were doing something else? Maybe they didn't have the pressure of feeling sold, or mm-hmm. that someone was convincing them to buy something. The decision was theirs and it was logical enough to just easily make the purchase without judgment or feeling like you were sold on something. I mean, there's all kinds of things that like roll through my brain, but then result for you as a business is to sit back and go, okay, I gave myself an opportunity to not only make more money and have more experiences with customers, but the other part of me thinks like, man, I'd love to be able to go to those customers and say, what made you buy from us through the bot?
Right.
What was about our experience that made you choose the bot option? And there may be something there in your brand, but we kind of look at this transformation of how we adopt tech. And it's so great to see that during that moment of the pandemic, right, there was a lot of people buying homes, and there was a lot of people moving out of their homes into other homes and wanting to make those homes their own. And, there was this scarcity of materials of certain types of products that weren't available or had a lead time. And so there was this shift on how people were consuming home purchase goods. So like home security, whether it be flooring, other things that are in the home. As we shift to that moment when we talked about more companies that may have had a hybrid or a fully brick and mortar environment. When you, through your journey from all these different companies and the variations of call centers, have you seen anything change or get adopted, stay with, or go away that just was part of this concept of everyone going home, everyone being remote?
Yeah, there've been a lot of things. Now, one of the best things that came out of the pandemic for us is that the call center was so successful going remote during the pandemic that the powers that be realized that they didn't need to pay for the brick and mortar location that we had, which was extraordinarily expensive. And they were able to recover a lot of those costs. You can't recover all of them because you had to bring in new tools. You have to bring in compliance tools. We had to get used to working on, teams and things like that. And how do you train? How do you monitor? We were actually very, very lucky. We had a tremendous training manager in the call center, and she was already adept at doing remote training because she had been repurposed by the national training team to train, our markets in the different call center procedures and things like that because of very similar roles and functions. And so she was already doing remote training when the pandemic started. So that was one of the major pain points that most companies had that we found was not a huge pain point for us because she knew how to do it, and we were able to transition and take her knowledge and put it forward. So that was a really good lesson that we learned. The other thing was, luckily, we had brought in technologies that were going to allow for this sort of thing. And the funny thing is, I remember having a conversation with somebody saying, we'll never go remote. That has been discussed, and we had a few agents that we would give you could earn the right to work remotely, but you had to pass major hurdles in order to get there. And I said, that's not why we're building this platform this way. We're building this platform this way in case we have a fire in the call center, and what do you do tomorrow morning? Because here's the deal. Your customers are going to care that you had a fire in the call center, but they're still your customers, and they still don't care because they need their product. They need what they're purchasing from you. And in our case, flooring. But, it's one of those things you need to build multiple redundancies and things like that in order to, make sure that your call center is available for your customers. And one of them was being able to, okay, let's say we lose the call center. What do we do? Well, we can either go to a ballroom and set it up there if we have sufficient Wi-Fi, or we can work from home. And when the pandemic came along, well, that answered that question. And literally, it took us 48 hours to get everybody home up and running. And we just literally did it in shifts. You came in, you got your computer. First shift came in, logged in, started taking calls. Next shift came in, picked up their computers and went home. Then they logged in, first shift went and took their computers home. Tracy had it organized completely, and it ran very, very smoothly, and was actually a major win for us in the pandemic. Was just how smoothly we were able to get that up and running, so that our customers never skipped a beat. They never had to worry about it.
A lot of the themes that you're talking about just kind of resonated and brought me back to the discussions we had during that time. We are digitally connected to the world.
Yes.
And that's what enables us. And for the remote work that you were talking about, that interconnectedness is what allows us to still have engagement and still be able to deliver the culture of our businesses. Otherwise, we'd be okay with transforming our business into something completely different, which we're not, right? All of our businesses still want to figure out how do we still deliver this experience, but still have people remote. So when people went remote, did you have this group of people that just couldn't make it? They couldn't figure out how to do this thing in isolation or separate? Or were they like, heck yeah, we're working from home. I love the time saved in, commute and everything.
Right. There were some that didn't adapt. Sure. So one of the things that I find, remote work appeals to a certain category of people, really. One of the things I didn't know before the pandemic, but makes sense, is that young single people, most people meet their spouse through work, generally speaking. And so if you are remote, chances are you're not going to meet anybody in your living room. I mean, or your office. But if you're in a place where that's not really a concern, I find that working remotely provides fewer distractions, allows me to focus more. You talk about talking around the water cooler. And yes, I understand that that is an important part of socialization with coworkers in the call center. But by the same token, you actually spend a lot of time talking around the water cooler that I don't spend now. And so it's a balancing act. And, the thing is, not everybody is built for that. I find people who have a sales background, because you have to be a self-starter, tend to be a little bit more open towards remote work. And other people just like the camaraderie of being around people. We are not a hybrid firm, but I think a hybrid firm fixes that problem perfectly. I think what we see is that people who really can't handle being remote don't stay, and that people who love it do stay, and that those, people sort of sort themselves out over time. It's not a matter of, forcing the employee into something. It's just a matter of, this works best for the company. And then you have to decide if it works best for you as an employee.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. And there was something you said earlier in our conversation about how you had your best voice people, that people wanted to put them on chat or another medium that was non-voice, right? SMS, chat, whatever it ends up being. And that usually didn't work out the way people expected. And then vice versa. The best people on chat didn't want, like your example with your superstar doing 15 chats and says, I'll quit if you put me over here. But there's going to be people today that maybe traditionally have just done voice, or they have SMS that's kind of this thing in the corner, right? It's just this edge case. So for that next company that's coming out and they're saying, hey, I want to start adopting, let's say, chat or SMS as another medium. And it's not just within the experience. So like, I'm on a call and I'm just going to send you an SMS after the call. Like, you want to actually have it as a channel dedicated. What advice do you give people when they're going to go and explore that, to not make these mistakes and take their top phone people and just start mixing in chat, and then it's a terrible experience for both parties?
Yeah, that's probably the best thing I could recommend, would be to find somebody who has a background in it before trying it. Here's the problem. Technology sales people will sell you their technology, and that doesn't always mean that they know the best ways to use the technology. They will show you how to use the technology, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you're going to get the best experience. And, here's one of the things that I do tell people. There are things out there that we haven't tried yet. And while I have a basic understanding of the tools and processes, if you've never used it before, I don't think you'll get the best return on your investment that way. Now, that kind of is dodging the question, but I think it does help. Because Empire had tried chat before I came. They didn't really know how to deploy it properly in order to get it up and running. And quite frankly, there are a lot of best practices that I know of for chat teams that we did not adopt because it didn't really fit with the way we did things. So we had to adapt a little bit. One of the things was like, one of the things we found was with chat teams, they should be isolated from the rest of the call center because they want to play loud music. And they tend to talk a lot to each other while they're chatting. And that's a benefit. So we would put people in groups of 4 so that you had somebody on either side of you or in front of you that you could ask a question if you didn't know the answer. And we would vary the amount of experience on those teams. Fast forward to a normal call center, which has, cubicle life, and it's not convenient to readjust the entire, to create a separate area for those teams. So we had to adapt to that. But I still think it really helps to, either isolate somebody on your staff that has some experience with it somewhere, or bring someone in from the outside that has some experience. I think you'll get the best performance that way.
Yeah, it's really interesting how voice obviously requires sound. And so if your environment, right, sounds too loud, you can't hear the person talking, or even when everyone went home on remote, right, you ended up hearing the doorbell ring. You ended up having kids coming home and talking in the background, dogs barking, right? It's a completely different experience. Where in chat, yeah, you may have people sitting there going, well, I'm not talking at all day if I'm only doing chat. So they have this environment of music and talking and engaging with people. And then obviously there's a time difference on response and how often things come in and so on and so forth. And so as we take that concept of, medias and channels, and we kind of pivot to this concept of how we mine the information and the data that we have, because we know there's tons of it. We've never had a lack of data. It's always like, what do we do with it? And how quickly can we do something with it? And who owns it? So we talk about surveys as an example. You've said in the past, surveys don't tell, they only tell you part of the story, right? So when you're looking at mining data and offering these richer insights, how has the technology like AI and other forms of analysis really impacted your ability to tap that data and do something with it?
It's game changing. Okay. And you touched on something that is a constant refrain for me, which is the call center sits on the greatest repository of business information that you can possibly imagine. We send surveys out. We spend millions probably surveying our customers. I'm not just talking Empire. I'm talking the broader industry. Here's the problem. People who respond to surveys are motivated to respond to surveys. Not everybody responds. So the people that are answering you are either extremely happy or they got a bone to pick with you, and that's what you're going to get back from your surveys. Whereas if you listen to the calls, guess what? Every single customer tells you why they called and what it is they need to do business with you. Now, you may not be able to provide that to every single caller, but the fact of the matter is, if you know and you see trends, then you can pull that together. And we saw, they did it. We've been doing voice analytics for a while now in the call center, but it's gotten so much better with AI, because AI is able to take a question, and especially now the new generative and agentic AIs, you can actually ask a question. Hey, listen, what are the common trends that we're hearing? What are customers looking for? And it'll just go listen to your calls and come back and it'll say, 80% of your callers are asking for this. Oh, if 80% of my callers are asking for that, maybe we should be providing that. Things like that. Or if you're getting a lot of people asking the very same question again, maybe we build that into the talk flow so that we anticipate the objection and we overcome it beforehand, and we make the journey smoother for a customer. It's giving us control over things that were always an art. Okay. Workforce management is an art. I don't care how they tell you the technology works. At the end of the day, it is still an art. Aligning your KPIs with your training and things like that. There's a great AI company out there specifically has a program to listen to your calls and determine whether you're matching your KPIs or not. Okay. And you're coaching to your KPIs. Coaching is another great area where AI is helping us out now, because we spend a ton of money training our agents. You bring your agents and you just spend a lot of money training them. And then they get really good at what they do, and we promote them to supervisor, and then we expect them to know how to supervise because they've been supervised. But That's not really true. And the truth of the matter is, coaching an agent is a difficult process. It can be uncomfortable for both the coach and the agent because sometimes you have to call out behaviors. And then the other thing is it doesn't really work. So what happens in a normal coaching session is you sit the agent down, you say, okay, here's the calls that you made, these errors on. And you then, once you're done with that, and then you say to the agent, okay, well, now we're going to role play those things. So you role play for 15, 20 minutes. Okay. Everybody hates role play. It's uncomfortable. It just doesn't feel right, but you do it. Okay, great. Agent, remember, here's the thing. The agent doesn't want to fail. So they are fired up. They go back out onto the floor. 3 calls later, they're making the same mistake. Why? Not because they want to make the mistake. It's habit. It's what they're used to. And you can't break those habits in a 15 to 20 minute role-playing session. So we need to come up with tools that keep the agent working in the directions that we want. Tools like call guidance, which are AI driven. I got to tell you, that is one of the tools that is the most game-changing AI tool I have ever seen in my entire life. I don't care whether you set up an IVA or not. If you don't have call guidance for your agents, you need to consider having it. Because here's the deal. Even if you do have an IVA and that bot is handling 75% of your inbound phone traffic, guess what? That other 25%, those are going to be real hard questions because the bot could not handle that. You want to send it to an agent that has some sort of tool so that they can handle the tough questions, because otherwise they'll burn out and you're going to lose your good agents. And the other thing is you have to make sure that the escalation path is there. And so those agents have to be efficient and they have to be very, very good, because it doesn't help if you can contain 75% of your calls with a bot, but it takes you 45 minutes to get to a live agent if it can't be handled by the bot. That's not going to work. People will hang up and they will go elsewhere. And so those tools, I mean, the interesting tool is a tool like call guidance can also be repurposed to look at trends and do the voice analytics, because at its heart, it's a voice analytics tool. It just works differently than the majority of the voice analytics tools out there. And it's something to consider, because one of the things that I have found is that because voice call guidance works in real time, there's a bias towards real time in the company. And the same thing is happening with the voice analytics companies that are trying to bring out voice guidance. They do after call work and analytics. There's less pressure in that environment, and yet it bleeds over in the way they try to do their call guidance. It still tends to be more after call work stuff that's done. So you have to balance and understand what you're looking for in those things and use that and pivot and adapt.
I mean, there's so much to unpack them. And we could have a whole nother call on just the concepts of where automation, AI, and self-service done right can create a great experience for a percentage of one's customer base. And it could be different depending on how your customers want to consume and engage with you. But there's always, for now, going to be that part where something doesn't work well enough, or it's logically more complex, or it does require something that a human being, whether it be through empathy or some other fashion, needs to come in to diffuse or whatever happens. And so it gets to that point, and you said, but if it takes forever to get to a human being, that's a terrible experience.
Exactly.
You get to that human being and you know that it's the hardest of the hardest, the most emotional, the most challenging, then that means those agents have to be super agents.
Right.
They have to not only be trained well and managed well and be great at their job, but they need to have the tool sets in real time and afterwards to be able to help them give the best possible job, because now they're in the spotlight. They're the main attraction in that moment.
Yep.
That either is going to say, yeah, okay, these other things didn't work well, but I'm here to save the day, or it's logically where you're supposed to go, and now it's just a bad experience. And so as you look at QA, as you look at analytics, as you look at real-time guidance and agent assists and all this analysis of data, recordings, real-time and everything, it's interesting to see what the future will hold, right?
Yep.
Because everyone's talking about voice bots at some point becoming, for certain businesses, potentially replacing human beings. And some say, no, it'll only do some stuff that is not, it's repetitive work, stuff that human beings probably shouldn't do or don't even like to do. And then others will say, yeah, no, human beings are still needed because there's all these things that only a human can do. What are you seeing trend wise?
So I love this question, because the truth of the matter is, this is where I believe the industry right now is struggling the most. There's a great company, I won't name the name, but 2 years ago, they said they were going to all automated agents. And then this year they announced they were going to all human agents because they wanted the human experience. The problem is that's not the answer. The answer is both. It really is. The funny thing is, one of the most impactful connections that I ever made was on LinkedIn, and we were in a message group, message thread. It was called Humans First. It was about this coming AI apocalypse, how we were approaching a singularity where AI was going to put us all out of business, and nobody was ever going to work again. Bots were going to take over completely. And I mean, what I said was, first of all, it's not going to happen that way, because economics doesn't work that way. Because here's the deal. I could have a TV manufacturing company that I automate from start to finish. Okay. And maybe I can build TVs for $10 a TV out the door. If nobody's working, they don't have the $10 to buy the TV with. I mean, Henry Ford knew 100 years ago that if the product coming off his assembly line wasn't affordable by the people building it, then he was wasting his time. It would never, ever work. And that's part of the problem. Companies need consumers. And robots don't consume anything. And so that wasn't going to happen. And what I said was that the most powerful use of AI would be pairing it with humans, because humans are really good at some things. Empathy. No, not every human is, but we can hire for that. Bots, nobody believes a bot when it says, I'm sorry you had that problem, because everybody knows that it's programmed to say that. But bots are great at remembering processes. They're great at remembering where to put something or where to find something. Humans are terrible at that. And I mean, so if you pair them together, you get something that is greater than the sum of two parts. And that one comment led me to a call guidance company that I do business with now, and was really game changing. But the truth of the matter is, you have to look at it strategically. Here's the thing. If I was running a call center for a national chain of funeral homes, the last place I want a bot is in that front end IVR when you're calling the first time because you're calling because your loved one passed away. I don't want a bot dealing with that. You need a human to deal with that. And it's not going to be an easy or a pleasant conversation. But for every one of those local, I would have an IVA in place when you called the local funeral home, because most people that call the local funeral home are looking for calling hours. That's a transaction. You don't really need to have any empathy for that. Just tell them when, their loved one the viewing is, and, they'll be fine with that. So you really have to look at the customer journey and understand whether adding automation to it will improve that journey. And I think the answer really will be, it'll improve it for some, especially those who wanted to self-service. And so we can take AI and make self-service a delightful experience rather than something you have to do. And at the same time, still leave those channels open for people to get to live agents for the things that they need to talk to a live agent about. And there's always going to be that. And you just have to approach it from an idea that, well, let me put it to you this way. If we bring a tool into the call center, we don't necessarily know that it's going to take care of everything, and it probably won't. So you have to understand that this tool probably won't take care of all your customers, and you have to figure out the best ways to approach integrating it to determine whether your customers are going to adopt it and move forward with it, because they're going to determine it, not you. I mean, I know we like to say we're going to tell the customers what they're going. No, the customer is always king. I had a boss that told me one time, he said, The customer is the only person you'll ever work for that can fire you at any time and don't owe you an explanation. And that's the truth.
It's so great. It's so great. And I know we could talk forever. I just want to ask a transition, couple of personal questions, and then
Sure.
we can definitely hop into that piece. I'd love to just get some things that are not work related per se, and it may be, but you work a lot, I'm sure, but you got to do something when you disconnect.
Oh yeah.
What do you do when you're not working?
If I have the ability, my favorite thing is travel. I live vicariously through my children. My children are far surpassing me in capability and in what they're doing, and they're taking advantage of the world that we live in. I mean, my daughter lives in China. She went to school in Shanghai. She is now teaching English to Chinese children over there. My youngest son is a marine biology major at UH. And I mean, I wish I had thought of going to UH when I was going to college. I mean, I went to Framingham State. He took the far better course there, and I mean, things like that. And my middle son is an opera singer. And so, I mean, they've all kind of, taken advantage of this new world and, really adapted. And so I live vicariously through them. I like to travel to see what they do.
It's a huge diversity of all kinds of different things they're doing and where they're at. And you were saying something about you wish you had done something and gone a path like your child. So if you had to look back and say through your career, to your experiences, you went back to a younger version of yourself, what kind of advice would you give them?
Buy Apple and Microsoft. I mean, seriously. And it's funny because here's the neat thing. And I've had this discussion with my daughter because she's like, I don't know if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm like, oh, wait, don't worry about that. I said, I was 50 before I really understood what it was I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And here's the neat thing. If I went back and I took a call center path, all right, first of all, they don't really train you in college for call center jobs. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be the best customer service. And really, that's a shame because I can't think of any more honorable profession than serving a customer for a company. But that being said, had I learned in college what state of the art in a call center was, I'd be using physical ACDs. And, I didn't get into it until we were like, first of all, I've never seen a physical ACD. I mean, I came into a almost digital world. I mean, the first company I worked for, we were on VoIP. And so we didn't have all those things. It was all virtual. And so I would probably be a fossil had I learned back then. But really the key is just being willing, able, and ready to pivot at any given time to what's available for the company. I tell my kids, 99% of success is showing up on time and being ready to do what needs to be done. And if you've got that right attitude, you will succeed. And then you will find where you want to be.
It's great advice. And I mean, there's going to be people that are going to want to reach out to you and connect with you, Phil. How best can they do that?
Well, first of all, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will accept any connection on LinkedIn. I know the sales pitch is coming usually on most of those connections. I don't care because that's how I find technology. Here's the deal. If I don't talk to you, I don't know if you have a solution that can help me. And so I'm always open to that. So they're welcome to find me on LinkedIn, or if you want, you can give out my personal email address. It's pbennett1014@gmail.com, and anybody's willing to reach out to me there too.
Well, you never know. There may be people in the space of looking for flooring.
Hey, listen, if they want to do that, I'll make sure they get to the right place too.
Right? That's great. Well, Phil, thanks so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. And obviously to our audience, thanks so much for listening. And we hope that you enjoyed it and look forward to your feedback, and tune in next time.
Christian, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me in this episode. If If you're loving the content, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your YouTube channel for exclusive clips, webinars, workshops, and bonus materials. And if you're an Apple iTunes listener, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star rating and review to help spread the word. On our YouTube page, you can also leave us feedback, comments, and suggest future guests that you'd like to hear from. For even more valuable insights and information on the call center world, visit nobelbiz.com and access our on-demand webinars. I'm Christian Montez, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of First Contact Podcast. Stay with us for the next exciting chapter.